Welcome to the Practice Podcast, conversations probing the nature of practice. I'm your host, Dave Fearon. Well, it was in May of 2020, over 2 years ago, that I had the first recorded conversation with Dave Jamieson. At that time, he was finishing up his time at University of St. Thomas, where he had co-developed a doctoral program and a master's program in organization development, and knew Peter Vail quite well, since they both lived in the same town of Minneapolis. So here it is, a number of months later. Dave has since then done teaching at Bowling Green State University in their new doctoral program in organization development and change, and has just finished his first year as president of NTL, the National Training Laboratories, an august organization that has its roots in the efforts of people like Peter Vail and other great people. So we hope that NTL tradition that they undertook years ago will continue now that we're all back somewhat in each other's presence and flourish. And Dave Jamieson has some great ideas for how to make that happen. So without further ado, here is my conversation with David Jamieson. Folks, it was back in May of 2020 that I reached out to Peter Vail's friend, colleague, Dave Jamieson. And I said, Dave, I'd love to have you involved in the podcast that Peter and I started. I know he held you in very high regard. What's going on in your life right now? Which is basically the question we've asked now well over 100 people in the podcast. What's going on in your life? Which gives us a brief window into practice, a person's practice, the uniqueness, the way each of us have crafted our choices to the extent that we have something we do very well and other things we want to do better next. Yeah. So here you are now. Yeah. What are you doing now, Dave, that's different than May 2020?
Yeah, well, I mean, I spent most of my life consulting, running my own consulting. And then I stopped most of that and went completely into the academic world it ended up being about 10 years. And I ran a department. I directed 2 programs. I served on the Dean's Council and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, I was in that world for
You were
10
in it,
years.
right up to your neck. Yeah.
And I loved the part about it where you get to redesign programs and bring them up to date. And I loved all that work. And to me, then getting the students in and trying to redesign how to get away from the problem with academic programs is they overdo the theory sometimes and underdo the practice. Yeah. And Peter and I used to talk about that and he was aware of it as a faculty. He was always bringing practice more into everything. And so I was looking at it as to what I inherited and what I now had authority to deal with, and I just had to bring my faculty on board and stuff. And so I loved doing that work, and we were redesigning. We completely redid the master's, and then a couple years later, we completely redid the doctorate. And a good example was we had 4 research courses in a doctoral program, which everyone tends to have, but I added 3 practicum courses.
There you go.
With credits, so that the students, while they were learning about OD, because we were getting students who did not know OD at all, and they were now at the doctoral level, but they wanted to learn about it.
Sure.
And so what was fascinating is that we put the 3 practicum in there so that they would not just be learning in the classroom, but they all had to work either individually or in pairs and go out in the field and find a client and do some work.
Yep.
And that changed so much about our whole doctoral program. And they still had a dissertation, they still had research, they still did all of that. But to the person, they would leave saying, thank goodness we had those practica.
Well, and my hunch is that it gave them a taste for theory.
Exactly.
Differently than when you were, they were sitting and methodically taking notes on your pearls of wisdom and the other faculty. And I think that passivity, I know, used to irritate the hell out of Peter. Back even when I was his student, he would say, "You're not going to sit here in this classroom, folks," he would say to the class, "like bumps on a log. This is going to be interactive, or go down the hall and find some other place to sleep."
That's a great line.
And it was interactive, and what you're talking about is too. Now that was a while ago that you were doing that work, and then
we did that in the middle of the teens, I think, and we had 3 cohorts under the new design before things got shut down and I left there. But,
right.
And so that was how I enjoyed having an academic position, but I was never an academic personally because I didn't think or talk that way. I came from the practice world to begin with, and it turned out I was able to test myself. I mean, I tested tenure, I tested promotion, I tested being accepted by others at the university, and I could have done that for the rest of my life if they didn't shut it down, I'm sure. But anyway, I left there thinking that I would easily get another job, and I interviewed for 2 really good jobs, and during this is in early 2020.
Yeah, around the first time we connected. Yeah,
and during the interviews, they closed the programs that I was being director of.
I think I told you, Dave, when you told me that maybe you better not apply for anywhere else, or you'll be shutting down another one. But in fact, indeed, you didn't shut down the one that I found you at when you and I reconnected.
Yeah.
At Bowling Green State University,
right.
By a huge coincidence. We had no idea in May 2020
That's right.
we'd ever see each other again.
That's right.
And then I discovered and was discovered by Steve Cady's My Library.
Exactly.
And they said, "Hey, you've got a manuscript that you want to finish that Peter Vail started." And I said, "Yeah, very much so." And they said, "Well, we've got a new platform as long as you're willing to make this a digital book." And then I stroked my chin. I said, wait a minute, digital, it won't be sitting on a shelf in a library. And then I almost heard Peter's voice in my ear saying, "Hey, practice is growing and changing, man. And this is a chance for you to write the book with my words."
Yeah.
The way you want to, and it's going to be a living book. So if later on, somewhere in your ear, you'll hear my voice saying, "Hey, Dave, you got to change Conjecture 16. I just had another thought on how to make Conjecture 16. So that was how we reconnected at Bowling Green.
That's right.
What are the sorts of things you've been doing there, Dave, for the record?
Well, because their doctoral program had just gotten started.
Yeah.
And they believed strongly enough in use of self that Steve put a course in for them on their doctoral program, and Mian Chung Judge and I were asked to teach it because he knew us both, and he knew that we had done the research on that topic and stuff. And so we did the first 2 cohorts together, and then we lost Mian.
Yeah.
And I just did cohort 3. And I'm scheduled to do cohort 4 next summer. And in the first 2, I think maybe in the first 3 now, this particular course has really lit the light for a lot of those students, because one, I mean, they were new to OD, and they all have kind of mid-level management positions and stuff
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
And they're really good people. I'm really happy with them. And I've found a way to make the course fit into their short semester model, and still get really good results. And because I thought it would be too short, is what I thought. But these students have gotten hold of it. I changed a few things from what I did at St. Thomas, so I got them starting off at a deeper level where they were already assessing themselves as they went into the course. And as they did that, they started to discover things that then we were teaching during the course that they were saying, I can apply that to myself. That's something I can do something about, and that kind of stuff. So it becomes a professional development course in a sense.
Sure.
And it's been going really well. And that's my connection there. And then because they were doing a national search to get the next president of NTL, I got invited because they used to only use members to become their leaders. Yeah. And they've had some trouble with that, and they've also just didn't think they were getting good candidates a year ago. And so I stayed through it. They changed the search committee in the middle. I had 3 rounds of interviews actually with people. And I finally, because I wasn't working and I thought this was a decent match. I mean, I know that I've not been a member, but I know everybody in NTL. I've worked with them.
Oh, what a wonderful lineage you had you connected with in our field of organization, behavior, and development, and change. Yeah. NTL, I was absolutely thrilled, Dave, when I saw that you took it over, because like many long-standing systems of teaching and learning, it hit the pandemic and was hit by the pandemic.
That's right.
And from what I recall from sensitivity training, as we used to call it back in the day, was face to face and in a room. And
that's right.
And where you could see, feel, and hear people. And so it was a challenge, I suspect. But I understand now you're back live again.
Well, we're doing both. We're doing virtual and live, and there's more virtual than live at the moment. But I think we're still in the comeback stage because they stopped everything for 2 years, and that hurt them. I wish they hadn't done that, but they weren't ready to hop into virtual very well.
Well, no one. Who was? And look at all the colleges and universities. Was, in that March that we lost Peter, that was just a few days afterwards. They said, go home. It's Thursday, on a Thursday in my former institution. They said, pack up your stuff, go home, don't come back. And it was like that for months and months and months. And I'm pretty sure that most of the colleges and universities like
they all have
ours, they're looking at a steep climb back. But in the NTL experience and custom, it was very much about close face-to-face interaction. But I suspect now, since you're doing both, that they've somehow learned, or you've somehow learned how to make what we're doing right now on Zoom somewhat resemble the kind of easy, somewhat unstructured interaction that I recall was very much something that Peter worked on when he was at NTL.
That's
over 50 years ago. How does that work out?
It is work. Here's the thing: most everybody who's done it for a long time say the in-person is still the best way to do this.
Yeah,
at least to do the human development work. You can do OD courses and stuff like that virtually without it being, but they like to keep that personal contact in all of the programs if they can. Mm-hmm. And because T groups was the underlying methodology, they don't all act like, they're not all T groups, but they use some things about that methodology in every type of program. Mm-hmm. So that there's experiential education happening in an OD program, a social justice program, or an actual HI lab. But when I say we're in the comeback period, I mean, I think we only completed 6 or 8 courses this year, programs to the public.
Mm.
And I'd say they normally were doing 1 to 2 a month.
Yeah.
Every other year. So it's hurt us financially because we're not getting enough people coming. And we thank goodness for the virtual version is where we are getting some people coming.
Mm-hmm.
And now we have to balance out next year, and we're trying to get closer to 50-50 where we'll have virtual and in-person next year. That's our hope. Yeah, that's our hope.
So you're back in the program development stage of your career again,
yes.
David, in a new way. You know?
Yeah, and actually we have these different subgroups in the organization that actually are responsible for most of those. So I don't get to do the hands-on development, and I wouldn't have time for it anyway. But this is where my new challenges are. So I'm clearly smack dab in practice. I had to start off by saying, okay, I'm not consulting to NTL. I'm their president.
Yeah.
And that was a change of my mindset, number one. And I've been president before. I know president of a nonprofit. I've done that before.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality was I knew that they had been through a few years of difficulty, financial difficulty and members leaving and stuff like that. And so I said, this has got to be a turnaround type situation. And they're going outside on purpose to bring somebody from the outside. And what I realized when I walked in there is I truly was an outsider when I walked in. and so I have spent a lot of my time being accepted, number one. Thank goodness I had a reputation and I knew a number of members.
Yeah.
So that has helped give me support there. But the challenges are tough. And I'm thinking to myself, this is way harder than the last 2 or 3 jobs or the consulting that I had, because every day and every week I'm dealing with some of the same issues.
Yeah.
And so that's where, but this is probably a good example. We all need Peter to come back so we could talk to him about how we do this practice the right way.
Well, there was a time in the 75th Jubilee series that you ran, and I watched or somewhat participated in every bit of it.
Good.
And I think is it Barbara Busker? Is that correct?
Barbara Bunker?
Bunker, okay.
Bunker, yeah, Barbara
And
Bunker.
I happened to, maybe she said it in the large group part, or maybe she said it in my breakout group. But what she did say was, in the terms of the lineage of NTL, she said, well, Peter Vale and I volunteered to help the organization out of a real big bind. So they've been in binds before.
Yeah.
And she said, we said, we'll do it. We got together and we solved one problem after another, in so many words. And there was a turnaround. So it's kind of, I don't know what the word would be, karma, that you, who was a friend and colleague of Peter's, are doing now what he and Barbara and perhaps some others did back then. And it did take some fresh thinking, but it also took this very deeply grounded concern for what a person was going to do as a result of the time they put in as a learner within NTL. It was very much, it was experiential.
That's right.
I'm so glad to hear that you're still keeping that in there. And I'm really glad
to hear that. And so there's a lot of optimism that I have about where we should be and where we could be. Mm-hmm. And I'm finding the struggle is a little bit about getting enough people re-engaged to want to move forward, because some people are frustrated by something that happened 3 years ago, or they're frustrated by the way they were treated by someone else. And a lot of people just hold on to grudges. And it took me a while to realize it, because I never expected it of the members of NTL, but it turns out that there's just a lot of these little divides and stuff going on in there. And so I'm doing my best to just be myself and show up in all the different meetings and speak up from time to time and answer questions when they have it. And then I do monthly town halls and I do monthly board reports. So I'm trying to get the whole picture into my report so that people can see what is and is not happening. And but that has not yet been enough. So as I look into my second year, I'm looking for how am I going to prioritize a few specific new things that we need to do. And that's what I'm hoping. That's what I'm hoping for next.
Do you have a couple of light bulbs over your head? Can you give us a little preview of what might be new for NTL?
Well,
I'm not a journalist asking you this.
I know.
I'm a friend.
Well, I'll give you an example. In the last 5 or 6 years, a lot of people have entered the marketplace. The younger two generations, for example, they do not know NTL. They have no history related to NTL.
That's right.
And so we have not been good on social media, and therefore we're not well known in the marketplace. Then we shut down for 2 years, and coming back is like people don't even know who we are. So I want to do way better social media, and we've hired a guy who works part-time for us now, and he's already expanded our LinkedIn network by 5,000 people and stuff, and he's starting to build that back again.
Great.
And then the second thing I wanted to do is bring the kind of thinking and thought leadership to the marketplace without having to go through 6 months of developing new programs that take a week or something.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at short-term programs, things that fit the webinar model.
Yeah.
And I want to do them for the public. They have done them internally before, but they weren't running them in the public programs. So we've started to form a little group, and we're about ready to start. I want to get a schedule started early next year so we can start running these things at least once a month. And my hope is, because these are easy to put together, let's say you're going to do one.
Yeah.
We have to set up the technology, but we don't need to do much else. We just need to get the date set, and you come in and you do it.
Yeah, give me, as we say, give me a topic and let me flesh it out. And I think you'll get a lot of volunteers for that. I truly believe that. I think there are people like us who, hey, we'd stand on a street corner and try to help people solve the organizational problem of whether the bus was going to come on time or not. So that's sort of part of our nature. And I know many people now that I've met because of the book and because of my involvement that, you take Frances
Baldwin.
Baldwin. Yeah. I mean, it's a generous, and she and I have both popped up, in various events, and she was a podcast episode, terrific to talk to. But my point is that as far as the webinars go, I think there will be plenty of very interesting people who might say, I would like that kind of exposure. I'd like to have that kind of interactivity, which webinars can do now. And
that's what I'm thinking. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking of a 1 hour model, a 2 hour model, and maybe even a 4 hour mini workshop model. And because everything beyond that is what these hub groups are putting together as programs that are longer, 3 days, 5 days.
Yeah, big commitments that a lot of people just can't afford to make. That's sort of bothered me. There were several times, and even as my professorship gave me a lot of flexibility, I still looked at a chance to go to an NTL and thought, geez, that's 3 or 4 or 5 days.
That's a lot. Yeah.
And it was tough. And so I didn't do it. Now I deeply regret it. I remember when you were up in Bethel, when they were up in Bethel, I was in Farmington, Maine, which is about 45-minute drive. And I knew it was close. And Peter once even said, I'm going to be there, come over. Yeah. I can't remember why I didn't do it, but I'm kicking myself because there is something very much in the roots of NTL with Kurt Lewin being really the founding thinker of the field that you and I have enjoyed. And so there's that, but there's also, I hope, fingers crossed, because people are looking at numbers of choices of even giving an hour of their time. Yeah. There's something about it that says, you're going to get a chance to think about you while
Yeah.
while this is going on, just like your course in knowing in the self. It the course saying this course isn't about how people in the field use their self as instrument. It's going to start with you.
It's you, yeah.
And then
you do it,
and then you can sort of look at others, but the fact of the focus on the person, it could be kind of rare these days because everyone's got a shtick and they want to just tell you about it rather than say, let's think about you in the context of what this particular webinar is about. And feel free to speak, make a lot of notes, feel free to make yourself a part of the conversation. And I think that's the spirit. I'm sure the spirit of how you would run it.
Well, that's how I would do it. And I want to get that started. And the other thing, I want to try to get the groups that are putting on public programs, I want to get them to, while I know they're trying to bring back the things that they stopped, and some of them were always popular, and so they might be right, they might be popular again, but I want them all to think about one new program that is 2023 and to 2025 relevant. Because how they've been doing them in the past may need to shift a little bit. And right now, I'm afraid the people who are active are the people who have been there for 20 and 30 years. They don't really think about doing things differently. Yeah. So I want them to think about at least trying something new. And it's like when I've been teaching OD for 50 years, but the last 10 years, I've been teaching it differently because we live in a different world now.
Whitewater world, right?
Yeah. And
change is changing.
I have no trouble with the essence and the foundations, which everybody keeps wanting to shortcut. And I say, if we do those well and we just work on the hows, we do them a little bit differently now, or we invite different, then I think we're still doing good OD work. But the way we used to do it took too long.
Well, that's it.
It just took too long.
Well, I've had to learn that too. I when I took up the challenge really of working with Peter when he was alive on the book, and then after, it totally changed my timetable. I was retired and I was saying, I'll just play golf all day and sing songs all night. But it became an undertaking of something that really valued to me. But my point is that then, and this is to the point of getting NTL up into the social media, I realized, okay, the podcast, but how can I get people to listen to it? So I had to learn more about LinkedIn and Facebook, and I started posting stuff. And that was giving me some listeners. And then, over time, well, I want more listeners. I want more. And then the book was available, and it is now. And I thought, we've got to get this book. It's different. It's a different format. It's a different way of having the book at hand versus on a shelf. And so I see multiple points of time when I have to put up the message quickly, to your point. I would love to think through, something I put up there about, a particular podcast episode, but I'd rather now see myself come up with something spontaneous, thoughtful, and certainly I'll edit it, but the difference is pace.
Yes.
And not because I've got this young man, Nathan, who also works with Steve and Nexus for Change in my library. And young Nathan saying, Dave, people won't read past the first paragraph. You write 3 paragraphs, you've got to pack the first one. And I'm like, what? I mean, a paragraph, they haven't got time. He said, well, think about it. They're scanning. They're flipping through the LinkedIn. They're seeing what's on, who's rocking, who's looking for a job. And then they come to you. And so we've got to put some punch in it. So I'm learning that. So
that's true. Yeah. And I've never done very good social media myself. But I'm learning,
well, get ready.
I'm learning more about it.
Get ready to have them teasing you to put, to be, quick and not quick and dirty, as we used to say, but quick and elegant. How's that?
I know, quick and elegant is what we need. Yeah. Well, and I mean, and so you've been living in the adaptive world. I mean, you've been adapting yourself to the things you're now trying to do, which is beautiful. I mean, that's exactly what, and I know that I still have room to do that too. I mean, and I'm trying to get some of the people in NTL who might know more about it to let me in on it and let me know how to do it. But the reality is most of our people, if we can't get money where we can hire some people in staff roles, even part-time roles, that's where we're going to get the expertise now. We don't seem to be getting it as help from members as we used to.
Yeah,
So,
it was largely a voluntary organization. Yeah, it's a tough challenge. But adaptive is the word. I mean, that's sort of what personal development, organization development, change is inevitable. And the real challenge is how effectively you can learn. And this, back to Peter for another moment. When he came up with that theme for the first book, Managing as a Performing Art, I'd been his student in the 70s. And so he used to talk about and write about his essays about that theme. And he would be very concerned about us as his students and colleagues, that we were somewhat stuck in the mud. And this was this is the 60s and 70s, man, everything. But still, there was he was nervous for us. Let's put it that way. That we weren't going to be confident enough as learners to be able to leave the nest, if you will, of the classroom as students, get out there and then see how wonderful it is when you're picking up cues and finding people to help you interpret those cues and then using them to keep yourself moving forward. So that's basically all 32 conjectures of the book were about, you are the kind of person who can do this if you're committed to something that really, really matters to you. And that's so right. I'm hearing in your story, Dave, that it's always mattered to you to help people when you were a consultant. To see their way forward. Then as when you came to academe, they would have been probably happy just to stay with the conventional MBA and other standard stuff, but it wasn't, the subscribing was not as strong because there were hundreds and hundreds more MBA programs out there. So and doctoral programs for that matter. So you said, well, let's put together something that's different. And
it was different.
And you did that for
we did that for quite a while. And one of the things I also learned is cohort education is where I started at when I was at Pepperdine University. And they had a model that I fell in love with because I saw how well it helped people learn. And that was they did residencies. They did 4 a year, so people could travel from anywhere in the country and go there. And they were about 6 days long, or 7 days long, I think, with the weekend. And we had all kinds of guests that would come in for 1 day or 2 days and be with them during their week. So we got the right people speaking to them. We got them all going out into the field doing something during that time. And that was a master's degree. But that was so embedded in my head. When I got to St. Thomas and I looked at our doctorate, I said, that's the best model we could use. And we did. We created the doctorate with 4 residencies a year. And
it
works.
And well, when Peter went over to Antioch, I talked to Al Gustin, and for one of the episodes way back then, and Al said, we knew the Antioch tradition was the residencies and the somewhat virtual learning, and so Peter brought that spirit there too, and that was his last teaching in the last few years. But I remember him saying, both in the podcast and then to me personally, he said, one of the most exciting things was going to those residencies, and Al said that they used to accommodate Peter in his wheelchair to go, and he'd say he would just light up
Oh, absolutely.
For those several days, because it was his chance to be face to face with these so-called kids. They weren't kids;
Exactly.
they're mid-career, like your students.
Mid-career people, yeah. No, you're absolutely right, and I felt the same way. And I taught at USC for a few years, where you do a Tuesday night or a Thursday night, and you do it for a while, and you break everything down into 3-hour segments and stuff.
Yeah,
and that's how I learned teaching. Then I got to Pepperdine and I threw it all out, and we completely did it differently. And then when I got to St. Thomas, I started doing that with different courses. And then when we got to redesign the program, we were able to put it together. But what I now say to people is there is a couple things about it. One is cohorts are way better because of the relationships they build.
Oh, yeah.
And then number two, the learning comes from more than just the faculty now. It really, truly comes from each other. And when I saw that model, I think that's still a better educational model when you can pull it off. But your colleague and my friend Carol Gorlick has had the rare opportunity to do an ethnography study of each of those cohorts, and so she's seen it come through now to the fourth one. And Carol and I meet every once in a while, and she helped me get a chapter into the Collaborative Change Library. But anyway, my point is that Carol would wholly agree with you. And then the idea of having a presence like she's had to be able to see and compare over time probably adds another dimension that her feedback probably could be. I think her research is going to be very valuable, actually, because nobody else has studied it that I know of. There's just people who have experienced it.
And then the word's got to get out there, right?
Yeah, I hope so. And I mean, if I were to do any other educational things, I would try my best to do them as cohorts where they have some, where they come together at least sometimes. That would be my model, I think.
I'm wondering, as we're watching the time here, and this is wonderful, but I'm just wondering, going back to NTL, is it feasible? Would it be feasible to create virtual cohorts of NTLers going through some kind of longer period?
Yes.
So that the subject that could make it unique, because most of these institutes, like the leadership ones down in North Carolina, you're an individual and you're there, and you may get acquainted for a few minutes with whoever's on your side, but basically you're alone. You're the
That's
lone,
right. That's right.
Student. But if you have a cohort model adapted for something for the 23 and beyond, where I'm Dave and I'm going to be in this particular cohort for 6 weeks, but
but
we're going to meet. There'll be provisions for us to do the socializing. We'll be meeting periodically over the 6 weeks, basically, eventually at the end of 6 weeks, you've made hopefully dozens of friends, and but the other part is they could be from all over the world if you do it virtually. So you could have a cohort with someone from Scotland and someone from Toledo. I don't know. I would have
I know we can do it. They've had an OD certificate program that used to be very popular, and it was done with cohorts in person.
Oh, really? I thought I was being brilliant.
No, they used to do that. And I think it had 6 courses or 8 courses, I forget. So that cohort would come back together 6 or 8 times over a period of a year or something.
Well, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah, and that'd be perfect. And I want to do a new certificate on use of self, which in order for it to work, needs to be broken into pieces where people come back together. So I'd like to get some spare time if I find some. I want to get that organized, because I think we should be offering that. I mean, NTL's been known for that piece as well. But really, there's just not been much written about it, and there's not been that much designed about it. But Mian and I have done a lot of that work.
Yeah.
And I now can carry it into different formats without any trouble. So
it's awfully nice that you are carrying on Mion's work, and I'm doing my very best to carry on
with Peter's.
And there's something to that I think keeps us both young.
Yeah. We lost her way too soon. She's been brilliant for a long time, and even in our own conversations, we weren't done with things we were going to do together, and now we won't be doing them together. So I've turned my attention to grad students who take hold of the use of self, and they want to do something more with it. And I say, that's great, because I want to pass it to all of you who are 20 years younger than me. So that's exactly how I feel about it. And Mion was the same way, in that she wanted to pass it on. And I've kept all the slide decks that she used to do, and I can't do them the same way she does, but we're 95% on the same page about everything with use of self. So
yeah. Well, Dave Jamieson, this has been a delight to be reconnected with you, to see that a lot has changed for you since May of 2020.
Yes.
For me, it sounds awfully good. These changes, you're at probably one of the biggest ones right now that you could have bit off, but it's gonna work. I predict if I come back to you this time in the end of 2023, we'll be talking about some great accomplishments for you personally, professionally, and for NTL.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you. I hope so. I really hope so. And it'll be my last round of something, I suppose. But I will never quit. I mean, I'll always do little things. But in terms of working full time like this, it's harder given the challenges all the time. But I'm still going to do it, and I have at least another year, and I want to see what I can get done in my second year. So,
okay.
All right. Thank you too. I appreciate us staying connected, David. Yeah.
Oh, and one more thing. How could I forget? The book on practice as a way of being is available now in digital form, something that would be new, like podcasting to many of us. And it's a great way of learning more and more about what this podcast presented when Peter Vale and I originated it several years ago. So please come to mylibrary.world/practice, and you'll see what I mean. Thank you.